It was tough. As a child, I was always kind of an outcast. My parents are immigrants. They came here in 1978 with 2 suitcases. I literally feel like I lived the American dream. My brother and I went to public schools. We had jobs. I started working when I was 12. I started babysitting in the neighborhood. And I always had to hustle, and I watched my parents do it as soon as they got here. My mom had a degree in English literature from India. Nobody would recognize it, so her first job here was chopping onions at the local Wendy's, and they had to struggle. I was a big nerd. I read books all the time and did science fair competitions, and I really found my refuge in academics and was really passionate about school. And so got lucky enough to get into Harvard, but didn't really have the money to attend, so I would cobble together different jobs. I did, in fact, clean toilets for our campus. We call it dorm crew, but it's like a janitorial service run by students. However, I do think that a lot of that kind of work is truly character building. I remember that summer, I would literally calculate the value of everything I purchased according to how many toilets it would take me, to clean, to purchase that. And I think it gave me this frugality and discipline, which I then brought into my entrepreneurial career. And so I think grit was part of my upbringing, and I'm actually really grateful for that, because I think if you didn't have that kind of a background, one of the ways that you can push yourself to get beyond your comfort zone, I think, is to read about failure and try to immerse yourself in more case studies that show you how failure can profoundly shape you. And it's hard. I mean, in the early days of a startup, I think rejection is inevitable. So there's an element of just getting back up again when you've been punched so many times that you feel like you can't. And I don't know what it is in us that creates that sort of tipping point when you decide to get up again, but it's among all the entrepreneurs I know who are successful, that is the single biggest factor. It's not quitting.
The M2S team would like to take 30 seconds to share a message from the American Cancer Society, who would like to shine light on this important issue. The rate of new cases of cancer is 442.4 per 100,000 men and women per year, based on 2013 to 2017 cases. With these rising numbers, it's more important now than ever to encourage investment in affordable healthcare, raising awareness and accessibility for preventative measures. If you can, please donate to the American Cancer Society to help us fight against cancer and secure a future where receiving a cancer diagnosis isn't a death sentence. Thank you so much, and now back to the video.
It's important that we don't absolve ourselves of a moral duty to act. Sheryl Sandberg talks about this in her book Option B, about this idea of post-traumatic growth and using something that's tough as a growth experience. And so I find this fascinating, because I think my own view is that we become conscious of our smallness and how irrelevant these petty concerns are day to day. Like you'll be annoyed about, I often get annoyed about something somebody said to me at the office, or some political thing that's going on, in my friend group, or some other issue. I'm stuck in traffic, and I will forget, wait a minute, okay, at the end of the day, none of this matters at all. And most of the really successful entrepreneurs I know will tell me just how many people rejected them. For some reason, maybe it's because people assume that if you're doing good in the world that you are a little bit self-righteous and you're putting down others. There's a sort of a takedown desire people have. And I just feel like that's unfortunate. I think there are so many examples of truly corrupt, solely profit-seeking entrepreneurs who've done far worse, I think, who are under far less scrutiny than relatively good social entrepreneurs who, are flawed humans like we all are. And I guess my takeaway from that is to try to be a little bit more balanced in our assessments and look at the bigger picture. At the end of the day, I come from stardust. I will return to being stardust. None of this matters at all. The only real thing that matters is love. Loving people and being loved yourself. And I think everything else is kind of gravy. So what I often go back to when I'm really struggling or when I'm feeling depressed, I will literally go back and read. I have a file in my Gmail of inspirational stories from our workers. Stories that people will send me about their own transformation, or stories that managers of our centers will send me. And whenever I'm feeling depressed, I'll go back and read those just to ground me. I feel like when your core spiritual values or your morality are aligned with what you spend the majority of your time doing, it creates this unity in your soul. And I feel like having that has been such a cornerstone of my life. Best piece of advice I ever heard is from Ben Horowitz: don't punk out and quit. I have the Sama tattoo on my right hand, but I almost feel like that should be the other tattoo, because I think the most worthwhile, worthy things in life are just the result of a lot of, painful, enduring failure. And being able to pause and breathe before I make decisions has probably, saved me a lot of heartache. The only real power we have in the world is choosing our response. We can't choose what happens to us. We can get stuck into situations where we are abused, where we are not treated fairly, where any number of bad things can happen. And so the only choice we can make is how to respond. And I find that knowledge gives me so much freedom, because if something bad is happening to me that I can say is beyond my control, I can say, well, at least, I have the power in my response to show the world what kind of person I am. But the choice to take that painful experience and mold it into something positive for the world is, I think, the deepest kind of healing we can have as humans. And for me, I think part of what got me through those tough times, eventually as I matured, was the knowledge that I had transformed that into something good for the world. I have a passion for doing this kind of work. It's almost a selfish passion because it makes me feel really good. Maybe it's the feeling that other people get when they go to church or they do volunteer work. For me, this is like my soul food. So when people are living in a constant state of scarcity, they cannot possibly make, what we would think of as good decisions. They are locked into a state of suffering and not achieving their full human potential that is just tragic. And it's tragic not just at the individual level, it's tragic in the sense of this is the greatest natural resource we have in the world. More important than going to Mars, more important than finding the next oil reserve or the next diamond mine. I think when we say that and do that, it makes ordinary people feel like they could never enter this field, and that's part of the problem, is figuring out how we can mine the talent of the bottom billions of people who've been left to fester. And I think it's a tremendous loss to the world. And so for me, I think it's so exciting to be able to go to places and see people shine, see people who could easily be astrophysicists if they had only had the opportunity, and hopefully get them on the path where they can achieve more of their human potential. And it is the most personally satisfying job I could ever imagine having. And I think as a society, when we do this, we feel more satisfied collectively as well.